Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It is now top 8 time here in Milan. Just 3 more rounds to go, and for some of these players, this is effectively a PTQ final. With 1,140 odd players here this weekend, only the top 4 will get an invitation to the Pro Tour, and one of those players is Serafin Wellinger. He's up against none other than the number 2 ranked player on the planet right now, Jeremy Dezani of France. We've seen both of their drafts already. We're about to see them play out their match. We're just making sure that everything's set up nice and neatly, and they'll be ready to go in just 1 second. Having seen Dezani's draft, how do you say it came out all told?
I think he has to be very happy with how his deck ended up. I saw him doing deck building. He opted for a 16 land build.
Wow.
With only a minimal amount of 5 and 6 drops. And interestingly enough, some of the late picks in Theros made his deck because he's just valuing the evasion of cards like Cetessan Griffin very highly with 2 Hopeful Eidolons, one of which we see on the battlefield.
Yeah, turn 1 Hopeful Eidolon, not necessarily something you see too often. Often people are looking to get extra value from the bestow, and it looks like, given that there's a Lee Crown Dryad from Serafin Wellinger, he's not going to be able to get in the early hits that perhaps he might like to, unless there's some kind of a way of pumping it or moving it around a little bit.
Jeremy Dezani doesn't have any ordeal, so it is in fact surprising to see a turn 1 Hopeful Eidolon followed up with another 1/1 God-favored General. Now, Jeremy Dezani might be already regretting his decision to go with 16 lands, because he does want to curve out with this deck.
Yeah, it's certainly a gamble, and not one that you necessarily see used too often by many players. Karametra's favour here on Lee Crown Dryad, which gives Serafin Wellinger a better chance of drawing into a great hand. It looks like, so he has 1 splash card and it's in his hand, that being a Polis Crusher. He also has his other big bomb in Abhorrent Overlord and a Nylea's Presence in his hand, so, Ordeal of Nylea in his hand. So all sorts of things going on for Serafin Wellinger here. All he needs is a little bit of time because he has the mana.
The fact that he's effectively passing the turn with 2 mana up here means that Jeremy Dezani cannot really afford to try any kind of combat trickery, because Serafin Wellinger might as well just have his own trick to play. Now, Jeremy Dezani drawing Seagod's Revenge and playing a Crone Skygod, no 3rd land for the 2nd ranked player in the world. No island yet either. His mana requirements are really low, no double white, or very little double white. However, the 16 land build a bit greedy by Jeremy. But
we do see that Serafin Wellinger, and at the moment, not showing off what his 2nd colour is, or indeed his 3rd, stuck on just Forests himself, able to cast a Cetessan Oathsworn there. Currently a 1/1, doesn't need very much to happen to turn it into at least a 3/3. How much Heroic Enablers does Dezani have in his deck to work with that Crone Skyguard?
He's a bunch of bestow creatures, which are pretty much the best thing you can do. Nyxborn, Shield Maid, and 2 Hopeful Eidolons are probably the number 1 thing he wants to be doing. Also, cards like Retraction Helix to target his heroic creatures. Now, I was confused that Serafin didn't choose to cast the Polis Crusher when he could, with
Karametra's favour? With
Karametra's favour basically being the 1 card that allows him to generate red mana at this stage of the game.
Of course, Ordeal of Nylea here on the Cetessan Oathsworn, meaning that it's basically going to trigger immediately, letting any of Wellinger's efforts to disguise what colours he's in, as if they really were efforts rather than simply not drawing other colours of land, go away, because now he's going to go, right, let's have a couple of swamps. So I believe that there's both a Grey Merchant of Asphodel and Abhorrent Overlord in Serafin Wellinger's hand now. So in some respects, his plays for the next 2 turns might be kind of scripted almost. He knows what the A plan is, and it's a pretty good one. It'll be interesting to see whether or not Dezani can put anything up that's going to really mess with that plan.
Well, Dezani didn't really come out of the gates in a sufficient fashion. Turn 2 a Crone Skyguard, for example, one of the scariest things, but well, at least in the Born of the Gods, there was limited format, still very powerful in Journey into Nyx, but now no 3rd land means that he's just stuck there. He's played a total of 4 1/1s, and that's just not good enough.
But it sounds like we might have a little update on some of the other matches going in our top 8 area. Riley Knight, what can you tell us?
Thanks, Tim. We do have a result from our first game between Ivan Floch and Timothy Simoneau. Simoneau, unfortunately for him, succumbing very early in the game. He had a handful of very, very powerful spells, unable to cast any of them, unfortunately, not drawing the lands he needed to deploy his cards. So he's facing Ivan Floch 1-0 up against Timothy Simoneau at this stage.
It seems like we have a bit of a theme for our French players here in the top 8, not drawing the lands that they need in their game 1s. And with another aura there targeting Sets the Oathsworn, it's now just a colossal monster. And this is not going to go well for Jeremy Dezani one bit. It may well be that Wellinger here is sort of thinking, well, can I get away without revealing too many of my most powerful cards? Because at the moment he's not really facing too much in the way of defense from the number 2 ranked player in the world.
On the other hand, for example, revealing the fact that he has an opponent overlord isn't going to make Jeremy Dezani's life too easy. It's not a card that you can actively play around easily.
That makes sense. So 2 points of life drain there from Grey Merchant Asphodel. Not necessarily the sort of thing that normally you'll see it just draining for 2. Normally people were getting the milk value out of that devotion ability. But actually we know that he's got a much bigger devotion plan that's going to come the very next turn. Dezani here in a real bind.
The fact that Leaf-Prone Dryad has reach, just completely shutting off everything that Dezani would have been able to do. Not that it would have been much, but still.
And there are a couple of Leaf-Crown Dryads in Wellinger's deck. He actually was facing a very interesting decision at the very start of the Theros pack, in that he saw a pack with a Grey Merchant and a Leaf-Crown Dryad in. At that point, he really didn't have that many black permanents and went with the Dryad. Shortly thereafter, picked up an Abhorrent Overlord and was fortunate to get, I think, a 5th or 6th pick at the Grey Merchant. I'm guessing that at this stage he probably would have taken the Grey Merchant, knowing ultimately how things were going to pan out. But the Leaf-Crown Dryad certainly doing good work too.
It looks like he also has a small heroic theme, at least with the Oathsworn there. So having a bestow creature that also acts as a 2 to reach is never a bad thing.
Yeah, he's got a Blood-Crazed Hoplite in there. I think he might have 1 or 2 other heroic options, but it's not the main focus of his deck. But certainly, I mean, bestowing a 2/2 is, I mean, Leaf-Crown Dryad is a very efficient bestow no matter which way you slice it. And when you've got heroic on top of that, it just becomes a bit of a monster.
When did Serafin pick up the card he just drew, the Cetacean Tactics? Is that?
That was his absolute first pick of the draft.
Yeah, that's about on par with the power level of the card.
Yeah, he was faced with the decision of that or Sigil Starfish, and he sort of wavered back and forth a little bit, but ultimately went with the rare.
And the Starfish went to Ivan Floch.
I would imagine so, yes. I think Ivan Floch might have actually ended up black-white.
Yes, but he did pick the Starfish.
Ah, fair enough.
He was very talkative, surprisingly, and taught me about his draft.
Fantastic. And a few Harpy tokens coming into play there. 4 in total. Hopefully we'll make sure we have enough and try and get them all on screen for you. But suffice to say, oh, there we go. So 1 Harpy token kind of leading the pack of a mismatched mongrel crew of Harpies. And Dezani here, at this point I kind of feel like the game going on longer is just Dezani getting a bit more information potentially out of his opponent rather than really keeping the game going.
Yeah, this game just went downhill really, really fast for Dezani. And overall, this is probably not the matchup that he wants to be facing. When covering the draft, I talked to Riley Knight, and we were thinking that this was a powerful white deck, but it didn't have enough evasion and would also struggle against the green reach creatures of the format. And even the 2/2 Leaf-Crown Dryad is a huge problem this game for Jeremy.
Yeah, I mean, it's proved a brick wall to the likes of Cavalry Pegasus and the Crone Skyguard. And indeed, God-favoured General, if it had been able to attack in the air thanks to the Pegasus, it might have been able to get something going for Dezani. But as things stand, Abhorrent Overlord ruling the skies and likely to end this game comparatively quickly. So Wellinger here, having a little think before deciding exactly which creatures to send in, ultimately deciding to leave one harpy back.
And you can see how aggressive he takes this. He sacrifices Grey Merchant of Asphyr, which is a reasonable creature, but he just wants the 1/1 flyer, because that's going to be the card that will allow him to close out the game. Oh, I wouldn't reveal that card. Okay, I was concerned there for a second. There's really no reason. Oh, I don't know.
I mean, it did win the game a turn faster, but I feel like that game was being won already. And if he'd waited another turn, and if something bad had happened, he still had that option. So giving a little bit of extra information to Dezani, which I'm sure that Dezani will have been happy to see, but for the fact that he did still lose the game. So this are overall brackets for the top 8. Evgeny Pestov of Russia up against Marcio Carvalho from Portugal. The winner of that one will be playing the winner of our Dezani and Wellinger match. On the other side of the bracket, we've got Nico Boni against Guido Citino. Guido having a fantastic last match against Ansi Alkio in the Swiss in order to make this top 8. And Ivan Floch up against Timotei Simoneau. And that's the match that we're going to have a live look in now while the players sideboard before game 2. So on the left of our screen, that's Ivan Floch, ended up in black-white. On the other side of the screen, Timotei Simoneau with the blue-black deck. And we already see an Ordeal of Heliod here on Tormented Hero for Ivan Floch. So getting the heroic trigger and then able to have a slightly more sizable threat potentially, though that looks to be a Thassa's Devourer on Simoneau's side of the board, something that he was employing to good effect in the last draft as well.
So we have a 3/2 Tormented Hero attacking into Timotei's 2/6 Thassa's Devourer, which wouldn't be unreasonable to be blocked here.
Yeah, I guess that Simoneau here, having a little think about what could be coming from Floch. Floch, 2 cards left in hand, sort of casually thrown on the table as if he's just ready to flip one over.
Could be a Bileblind, which wouldn't be a bad trade for Simoneau. I don't know how important the Devourer is to his game plan. It's definitely possible that he's a die-hard control deck that wants to mill out Floch here, and actually decides to take it. Now probably has a mental note that there is potentially a Bileblight in Floch's hand, and he's just looking to take control of this game in another fashion.
So Simoneau cracking back in there. The life total still largely untouched, but for that attack from Ivan Floch there. So there's plenty of play left in this game, and Nick's Infusion there, a card that got slightly misplayed by Simoneau in his match against Jeremy Dezani, where even though he lost, he just scraped into top 8. This time round, did what it was meant to do, -2/-2 to a non-enchantment creature, and kills it off quite straightforwardly.
Did Simoneau mill 2 cards with the Devourer?
He has, yeah. He's milled a Ajani's Presence, and I can't quite see what the second card is there. But hitting an Ajani's Presence certainly not something to be too sad about. Information for next game, and also one less card to worry about for this one.
It's not a good position to be in when you're white-black aggro, getting beaten down by your opponent's 1/3 and your opponent's 2/6.
Signs that things might not be going according to plan, eh?
Simoneau, by the way, on Asphyr, so potentially splashing Scholar of Athreos here. This is the Bileblight that I suspected Floch to have when he attacked with that Tormented Hero.
Had the read, and the Simoneau has the only creature on the board in that Thassa's Devourer, with enough toughness that it's going to be a tricky one to just sort of casually take out with a lot of removal spells. But it looks like we've got some more results through from our floor reporter, Riley Knight. Riley, what's going on the floor?
Yes, indeed. 2 results for you gentlemen in the booth. We have a game going the way of Guido Cicchino from Italy. He got up against Nico Boni, the gentleman from Switzerland, after resolving a Sea God's Revenge and an Interpret the Signs. Unfortunately, only snagged himself 2 cards off that. He still succumbed. He was still, unfortunately, the defeated party to Guido Cicchino's mighty green army, supported by some blue tempo spells. In addition to that, Marco Carvalho has overcome Evgeny Pestov and leads 1-0. Pestov's deck containing Stormbreath Dragon, supported by a plethora of blue cards, not quite enough against the Portuguese Carvalho, who was able to get up and is leading currently 1-0.
Fantastic stuff, thank you very much. And as that was all happening, it looks like Ivan Floch has found a credible threat in the former Grey Merchant of Asphodel, now enchanted with a Spiteful Return. So as it attacks, there's a trigger from the Spiteful Return and a couple of damage, and then Simoneau has to think about whether or not he wants to block. Guessing that he is going to throw this Thassa's Devourer in the way.
Yeah, I would expect so. Even with 3 power, oh, that's
even better.
Oh, I'm not even sure if it's even better, but yeah.
That being why.
This trades for Boon of Erebus. Boon of Erebus, a card that wouldn't have killed Thassa's Devourer when if Simoneau would have blocked with it.
And it's not quite clear what stage in the turn it is. Is there still time to block here?
Possibly, but the regeneration removes the Grey Merchant from,
of course,
from combat.
Yes.
So if Simoneau doesn't draw a mana sink here, a large bestow creature, or in the best case a splashed Skull of Athreos, then it might be Floch's turn to win this.
And we see a nice start from Jeremy Dezani in the second game here. God-Favored General coming down first, followed up by Cavalry Pegasus. Now, the General, when it's formed as part of Cavalry, doing really well, able to fly over, get tapped each turn, and assuming that Jeremy can get up to the mana needed to activate its Inspired trigger, he will be able to do all sorts of things with forming quite the army that will, in turn, be able to fly.
Dezani once again missing his 3rd land drop. He can't be happy with his decision to run only 16 lands in this deck. On the other hand, Serafin also with a rather weak start, because Frederica's chosen not doing anything on defense here. Asphyxiate, alright, is a card that at least gets the Skyguard off the table if that's what Serafin wants. He's holding double green cards that he's unable to cast, so both of these players actually with mana troubles here.
A tricky spot, and one that's not entirely clear who's favoured for, though I guess that the fact that Dezani running 1 fewer land means that he's got to be a little bit of a dog in this race to get mana sorted.
Well, he only has 2 compared to Serafin's 3, so, and if Jeremy is definitely playing this game on 2 lands, that's not the problem. If he ever finds an additional land, I think that the combination of Cavalry Pegasus and God-Favored General could be the difference, as long as Serafin doesn't have a reach creature.
Basra Tower Archer. Not going to get removed anytime soon because it's got hexproof. Potentially going to prove a problem for those flyers though, because it does have reach.
It's a good thing that it only has 1 toughness though.
Yes.
That's a big difference compared to Leaf Crown Diet. Just imagine Leaf Crown Diet bestowed onto Frederica's chosen here.
Oof. And of course it does seem like Serafin Wellinger here gradually drawing out of the issues that he was having with mana. He got the swamp down, and here a few options in terms of blocks for Serafin Wellinger. Doesn't know whether or not Dezani's drawn a land yet because he's neglected to play one pre-combat, and a few blocks come. Is there a trick from Jeremy Dezani? Now would be a great time for it. Nope, just a few trades. So Cavalry Pegasus, the Pegasus that fights alone, right up until the point that the hoplite comes from Jeremy Dezani. That's the battle-wise hoplite. So it gets bigger when targeted with heroic, but it also lets you scry. And scrying a valuable ability on this sort of a board state where he needs the extra lands.
And now Serafin is looking to cast Kermit's Favor, one of the best cards in his deck, which isn't often the case, but I really like it in his build. Triggers heroic, gives him extra mana sources, and it just works really, really well. Now Dezani is firing on all cylinders though. Nyxborn Shieldmate triggers Battle-Wise Hobbit, he gets to scry, he's going to be on the offensive. Serafin already down to 14. I have to say that I think that Dezani is favored here.
I mean, there is the potential. I think that there's an ordeal of Nylea. Is that right? In I may have miss the Karametra's favor as being a different creature in
favor. Mortal's Resolve, Grey Merchant of Asphodel, and I think one more ground creature for Serafin.
So without a reach creature, effectively it's just a straightforward race here for Serafin Wellinger. Can't really do too much about the offense, so he's going to have to see whether or not he can just do damage at a similar, if not faster rate. Pumps up his Citizen Earthsworn there and draws a card with Karametra's favour.
Oh yeah, the last creature is actually quite relevant. It's the 6 mana 4/4 flyer, which is an artifact, but it could be enough to stop the offense by Dezani.
Yeah, not quite a reach creature, but in some respects doing a similar sort of job. Return Phalanx there. It's a 3/3 that's unlikely to be able to attack anytime soon, though in principle I suppose the Citizen Earthsworn could tap for blue mana in order to make that a realistic possibility.
And it's going to be interesting if, or when Serafin drops his flyer, then it might be reasonable to hold back the ground creatures as well, because it's just so unlikely that the Cavalry Pegasus wants to suicide itself into the flyer. But now that this Excoriate takes out Serafin's best creature in all dimensions, really, I think that he's just going to be stranded with cards that are too expensive to get him out of this.
So Grey Merchant and Azrael effectively just on defense there, gaining him a little bit of life to potentially stay in the game for another turn or so, but it looks like this one's going to be going to a game 3.
Well, it's not over yet. If Serafin attacks here, it's not lethal, but okay, this does. He was just missing 1 or 2 points, and that made his attack lethal. If Serafin gets to untap, drop his flyer, and then maybe chain that into opponent overload. Of course, top deck lands would be needed for that. Then he could have eked it out.
Okay, so it looks like we are going to a final game. It will almost certainly be able to get a little bit of a look in on some of the other games fairly shortly. But in terms of side, oh hello. It sounds like we've got a match to go through straight away. So Flock against Simino, still in that same game too. But Simino is now on just 4 life, Flock on 11, and just the Spiteful returned on Grey Merchant, potentially a bit of a problem here for Simino. 2 swings from that Grey Merchant would be enough to end things. So it looks like Ordeal of Erebos has done good work there to put a few counters on the Grey Merchant. And they're just a land in hand. Simino extends the hand. Ivan Floch, our first player making it into the semi-finals. Timothy Simino, he was the one player on 36 points to make it into this top 8. After he lost in the last round to his countryman, he didn't feel like there was any chance that he could be in the top 8. But as it turns out, he just snuck in. But unfortunately, a relatively quick exit for the Frenchman. So Dezani, who's in our main feature match at the moment, was his last round opponent. He lost to Dezani, just about made it through, and we're going to be able to see whether or not Dezani, who only made it in by beating Simino, is going to be able to make more of his top 8 than his countrymen did. Players shuffling up here. Not really sure that there's loads of sideboarding to be done for Serafin here, because I was watching his draft. I think that the basis of what his deck is, as you pointed out earlier, probably is fairly well matched against Dezani. He's got some reach. His creatures are all like averaging closer to 3/3 than 2/2, which is probably about the size you want against the blue-white deck. It's just going to be a matter of whether or not his draws happen to match up particularly well. He does have the potential to power out some really powerful threats. Obviously, we saw the Abhorrent Overlord in game 1. If he can get that time, assuming that Dezani doesn't have one of the really fast starts, I think there's a very real chance that Wellinger can take this.
There's no question that Wellinger will dominate the late game if it comes to that. But keep in mind that the pressure is completely on Serafin here. Jeremy Dezani is very accomplished. He's looking at Player of the Year, and of course he wants a trophy. But he's playing for Proto qualification. He knows that his deck has a lot of room. It hasn't shown what it's capable of yet. Whereas Serafin knows the opposite. He knows that he's facing one of the best players in the world, whose deck hasn't cooperated 2 games in a row and might now fire on all cylinders.
And it looks like Wellinger might have to take a mulligan here. There we go. He's down to 6 cards. Jeremy Dezani the same. That gives us a bit of time, and thankfully, our saviour, Riley Knight, is over here with a little bit of an update from some of the other games.
I've got good news for all the fans of Nico Boni. The Swiss gentleman has managed to equalise the score at 1-1 now between the Nico Boni and the Italian Guido Cittino. Of course, Guido, the only man flying the flag for Italy in the top 8, and these guys have equalised at 1-1. Guido's Nylian not quite enough to get him past the Polis Crusher and the Raised by Wolves that Nico Boni was able to summon to fight the battle on his behalf. In any case, the match goes on 1-1 between Boni and Chetino.
Thank you very much, Riley Knight. A couple of Polis Crushers in this draft. Obviously, every now and again it does happen that you get multiple copies of a particular rare in the one draft, even now that we're into the full block, so just one pack of each set. Interestingly, Serafin Wellinger had the option on both of those Polis Crushers. The second one came after he had an Abhorrence Overlord, so suddenly he was a little bit more keen to make sure that he had plenty of black mana symbols in his deck. I think he ultimately went with a Tormented Hero, I think, from that pack. In abstract, not as powerful a card, but certainly one that's much easier for him to cast.
Not into going into full greedy mode.
I must admit that almost every draft I'm ever in, I would say that I'm in full greedy mode. I had a brief spell around the time that Rich Hohen first started doing draft coverage, which was among the first draft coverage you really saw on the internet, where I did some drafts where I just pretended to be Rich Hohen and took the sensible pick from every pack. I found that my win percentage went up massively, but it's still quite fun being really greedy, at least when it works out. So Dezani here, looking at his 6-card hand. It looks like Wellinger fairly happy with his. He's got a Temple there, one that is potentially going to help with his red splash because it is the red-green Temple.
Temple of Abandon and a Swamp in his opening hand. Pretty much the perfect mana base for a 6-card hand. And Jeremy is actually in the tank here. Is it because of his turn 1 play, or is he still considering a mulligan? That would be...
I mean, it'd be a very rough draw for Dezani to have to go down to 5. Yeah, he has kept. I mean, the thing for me watching Dezani is I would say that almost his default face is one of sort of pained concentration while he's playing. I don't think he necessarily gives a lot away, even though he does have quite an expressive face.
No, he forces himself to just be on top of things. And successfully so.
Absolutely, and very, very nearly on top of the pro player of the year race. Nothing doing on the first turn beyond a little bit of scrying action. Let's see whether or not there's anything on turn 2 from Wellinger. No, looks like we're going fairly slow and steady to start with, but Riley Knight, you've got more updates for us. What can you tell us?
I do indeed. Yevgeny Pestov has managed to tie the scores at 1-1 against Marcio Calvaio, the Portuguese gentleman. Stuck on 3 land for most of that game and unfortunately succumbing to the might of a Stone Shock Giant's Falter effect. So well done indeed to the Russian, making his top 8 appearance here at GP Milan and tying the score at 1-1 between him and the Portuguese Carvalho.
Good stuff, and good stuff from Jeremy Dezani. It looks like he's the one that's coming out of the gates on this game. He's got both the God-Favored General on turn 2 and Elite Skirmisher on turn 3. The General killed off before it got a chance to summon any troops, but Dezani's still at least able to trouble Serafin Wellinger's life total a little bit.
If the God-Favored General would have been allowed to trigger here, I think that it would have been really, really difficult for Serafin, who's actually holding a Shrike Harpy, so the 1/1 tokens by the General, not something he wanted to see at all.
The Shrike Harpy matching up fairly well against what's going on for Dezani. He's got the Akroan Skyguard, but now he's put to a little bit of a question. Does he want Wellinger to have a massive creature, or does he want to have 1 creature less? Turns out he said, you know what, you can have a 2/2 flyer. Sorry, a 4/4 flyer.
Serafin has quite easily stabilized this. Weight of the Underworld, a very important part of that exchange there. And Serafin is looking at powerful late game options that will cost 5, 6, 7 mana, whereas Jeremy Dezani's deck is mostly 2 and 3 drops. So despite the fact that he has a 5-drop and 2 6-drops, he really doesn't even want to be in this position. He needs to find ways to deal damage, and yeah, that is a good one.
So a bestowed Hopeful Eidolon there on the Elite Skirmisher, tapping down Shrike Harpy, allowing for some big attacks from Jeremy Dezani, and of course the lifelink that Hopeful Eidolon has bestowed on Elite Skirmisher, meaning that this is a race that all of a sudden is looking a little bit rosier for Jeremy Dezani. The Elite Skirmisher, now a 4/2, able to trade with the Shrike Harpy if Serafin Wellinger wants to block. But it turns out 4/4 flyers is basically all Serafin Vela goes into these days.
And let's be honest, racing is not what Serafin needs to do to win this game. He wouldn't care if Jeremy was on 50 life as long as he gets to control what Jeremy has on his board. And that 4-power skirmisher is potentially trading with one of the flyers, which is great news for Dezani. But then he's left with 2 1/1s against an opponent that is just going to continue to put out these large creatures.
Yeah, plenty of threats in the tank still for Serafin Wellinger. He's not out of gas yet whatsoever. And both players here with cards in hand. Dezani, in spite of the mulligan, it doesn't feel like he's really sort of too stuck on cards, though admittedly he didn't cast a whole lot in the last turn.
I love the fact that Serafin Wellinger is holding 2 tricks. Usually not a thing you expect from the mid-rangier decks in the format, but if Serafin Wellinger gets to, for example, cast Cruel Feeding for 10 life, for 20-point life swing basically, that could be huge.
So a bestowed Nyxborn Shieldmate here, meaning that all of a sudden Jeremy Dezani's elite skirmisher is, well, that much more elite, I suppose. Now let's work this out, 3-1, 4-2, 5-4.
Yeah, 5-4, just exactly not big enough to not trade with the RP anymore. So possibly Jeremy just hoping that your opponent doesn't block for some reason, which could actually end up working, because for Serafin there is a lot of value in having 2 creatures on the battlefield against the skirmisher's tap ability, but also because he has the strife spell, the black life gain strife spell.
I mean, that's true, but I mean, he's really going to have to lean on that life gain, because if he doesn't block, then he's going to be down single digits, and he has to respect that there are extra damage sources coming from Dezani's deck and potentially combat tricks.
Yes, but if there are combat tricks, then it's actually better not to block, because otherwise you would be losing your Heartbeat, but you wouldn't get the skirmisher as a result. And then it's actually smarter to try to well, get this life gain spell to swing the race in your favor. The amount of reach that the white-blue deck has is severely limited when it comes to these kind of matchups. So even a low life total is not a big issue, I feel like.
So Wellinger now down to 6. Dezani, he can smell the semi-finals, but we know that there might be a couple of things that make that a little bit trickier. Now Wellinger plays a Satyr Hedonist and then passes.
Satyr Hedonist doesn't seem amazing here. It's actually an important draw for Serafin, because it will allow him to prevent a double tap on his flyers to win Dezani the game, because he would still have a blocker available.
And Dezani here also playing a 2-drop and passing. His 2-drop and Areskos Sun Guide. The life gain not as relevant for him right now as simply just having more bodies on the board. And a Ravenous Lucacota here from Serafin Wellinger. The 2/4 with Vigilant and potentially a monstrous ability to consider. Now, the kind of cool thing actually about that Satyr Hedonist right now, there is red mana available, so effectively, if needed, Wellinger does have access to 4 mana, which is a relevant amount given what we know is in his hand.
Yeah, currently not able to cast, well, to pay for the strife cost, because he would only have a single black. But still, it is actually surprisingly relevant that the Temple of Abandon gives him the red mana. Also, if he should ever want to deny life gain for his opponent.
Yeah, if he blocks with the Hedonist, then he can then sacrifice it before damage. The Elite Skirmisher won't deal any damage, hence the lifelink just simply doesn't happen.
So the card that Jeremy Dezani is looking for here has to be Seagrout's Revenge. Just a complete blowout on this kind of board against an opponent with a 5, a 6, and a 6-drop, a 4-drop that Serafin might want to invest another 7 mana into. And basically other ways to get through here, which regular flying creatures aren't going to do the job. Jeremy Dezani, as far as I know, ultimately didn't end up getting any Aquarius forms. So his ways of getting through a board like this are actually quite limited.
And giving Serafin Wellinger time, a dangerous thing to be doing. all those creatures being untapped as well, we know there's at least a couple of copies of Asphyxiate in Serafin Wellinger's deck. Assuming he can draw into them, they could really change the shape of this board quite a bit. So land go, that does put Wellinger up to 7 lands, meaning that potentially Ravenous Lucacota could get big.
Serafin is playing this very patiently. He has the now has the 7 mana to make Ravenous Lucacota monsters, and he has to pick exactly the right moment to gain some extra life, and that's going to be a moment where Jeremy Dezani is tapped out in the best case, and where the sudden life gain, the instant life gain, just swings the game around completely.
But it sounds like while we're waiting for this match to conclude, there's a little bit more conclusion happening elsewhere. Riley Knight, tell us what's up.
Yes, thanks Tim. Nico Boni has managed to triumph over Guido Cecchino. Bad news for all of the Italian fans out there hoping for a hometown victory, but well done indeed to Nico Boni after being on the wrong end of an absolutely disgusting 3-for-1. Still managed to get there with tokens from Raised by Wolves and Rise of Eagles slamming into the red zone, and Guido Cecchino's Nylea was not quite enough. His devotion to green not powerful enough to overcome the Swiss gentleman who has found his way now into the semi-finals.
Tokens taking the Swiss player into the semi-finals, and it looks like we're going to have some tokens on the board over here too, because that Evangel of Heliod, quite a lot of devotion to white here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, I believe.
Yes.
So assuming that Nico Boni gets much further, he's actually already won a GP in Italy. He won in Torino in 2006. It's been a little while since then. He may want to just sort of remind the Italians of quite how powerful a mage he really is. And look at all of those soldiers. All of a sudden, Jeremy Dezani very definitely has the opportunity to attack around the creatures of Serafin Wellinger. So we were talking about finding the right time for life gain. This might have to be the time, right?
It could be that Serafin sets up trap here. If Serafin just lets Dezani attack with everything, finds the right blocks, and then cruel feedings his Lucacota and the 2 flyers, he suddenly gains 10 plus 6, 16 life, and that would just throw Dezani's math off completely.
So Asphyxiate now, getting rid of that elite skirmisher, the detritus from that being a Nyxborn Shieldmate and a Hopeful Eidolon that go from being bestowed on a creature to being creatures themselves. And Jeremy Dezani looks at his board and it's got an awful lot of creatures on them, but...
Did he draw Sea God's Revenge? He has a couple of blue cards in his hand. No, he's attacking with everything, so no Sea God's Revenge here.
Okay.
Oh, he could have boarded in a Stymied Hopes though. If he did that, then he could potentially counter a Cruel Feeding on 2 targets. This is insane. This could come down to a single mana that Serafin Wellinger doesn't have to pay for Stymied Hopes on turn, what is it, 12 of the game?
Turn lots. So in many respects, there's only 1 2-power creature attacking for Jeremy Dezani, but a whole host of 1-powered ones. He's blocked the Akron Skyguard, respecting the fact that it has the potential to get bigger. Also blocked the Erexa Sun Guide, and it looks like the Ravenous Lucacota going for the Evangel of Heliod, struggling to fit everything into our shot here. And there's the Shrike Harpy going in front of Hopeful Eidolon. So basically saying, I respect your creatures, but I want them to die, and the order I want them to die in is highest casting cost first. And here's that Cruel Feeding. 2 targets. There's the Stymied Hopes. There's the Handshake. Jeremy Dezani, successful sideboarding, able to take it. You seem stunned, Simon.
Well, I kind of called it.
You did call it. Is that what you're stunned about? You actually stunned about your own ability to call the shots on this? Because frankly, we all are. We've just got over it enough that we can talk again now.
As I said, the timing of Cruel Feeding would decide this game, and as it turns out, a single mana made the